This is Juan Guaido. Let me make this bigger. This is MSNBC propaganda on Venezuela. It's always important to watch these because it shows you the actions of the empire, what the propaganda they want approved on the people. It shows the mindset of the Biden administration, the commander in chief, and the executive branch. So when the United States and the West started this trade war against Russia and China that they could not win, and they completely failed at this trade war that they wanted to win against Russia, they tried to improve relationships with Nicolas Maduro. And we covered this last year. That fell apart because Nicolas Maduro not going along with the Ukraine war, very friendly with the Colombian left-wing president, who's very favorable and been speaking out against. He been with AMLO, been speaking out against. Like when Biden had the Summit of Americas, there was one of the countries that resisted that because they was refused the invitation. So you can see the West. Their next step is that they want to escalate against Venezuela some more. The West is desperate because they fall behind on China. As China pursue peace, they pursue war. Since they can't bring Nicolas Maduro down to heel, since they can't sanction the country to death, since Juan Guaido failed, they're going to continue their aggression. So that's why they bring him back on after abandoning him for quite some time. You got to know that Juan Guaido was in Colombia and he was deported from Colombia because Gustavo Petro in the Colombian government, one thing, they're not as far left as we want them to be, but it's very significant that Gustavo Petro do not fall for the Western bullshit on Venezuela. So he was just deported from Colombia. They don't want anything to do with this fucking fascist. Like everything they accuse January 6th Trump supporters of being, that is what Juan Guaido is. They literally try to overthrow the government of Nicolas Maduro. And then they said they accused Trump and the Republican Party of weaponizing government. The Republican Party criticized the Democrats of weaponizing government. You had someone that tried to kill Nicolas Maduro in the opposition party. And what would happen if someone tried to kill Joe Biden? They would be sent to prison. So the opposition party planned an assassination. Maduro sent them to prison. And then he said, oh my God, he's a tyrant. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party is charging Trump for a misdemeanor for paying a porn star. Y'all see the difference here? If Maduro, if AMLO, or if any country in the global south or any U.S. adversary try to charge their opposition the way the liberal class is charging Trump, they will use that as justification for a coup. So weaponized hypocrisy is corruption, and we must call that out. So let's play this video. You're going to see the Western media blames Guaido. Let's get into it.
Joining us now is Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido. Mr. Guaido, thank you very much for being with us today. Mr. Guaido, when we last spoke in 2019, you had just been recognized as the interim president of Venezuela by the United States and 56 other countries. Today, you're in the United States after having been threatened by Colombia when you tried to participate in a conference there. What happened?
Basically, the Colombian government threatened me with deportation and surrendered me to Maduro's hands. I'm here thanks to the mission of the American government to guarantee.
So this is why what happened in South America is so exciting, with Gustavo Petro winning, with Lula in Brazil winning, who's not going along with his nonsense either. AMLO, who he boycotted the Summit of Americas because the Biden administration wouldn't invite Venezuela. That's how hard he's going on this. Guaido is losing a ton of influence, and that's why he was kicked out of Colombia. So after this part, you're going to see where the host blames Guaido for not individually by himself overthrowing Nicolas Maduro and the Venezuela government. This is hilarious. I'll let it play here for a bit.
Guarantee my safety. I failed prosecutor.
You said you were threatened by Colombia. What does that mean?
The threat was direct, to be deported to Venezuela, where evidently I left the country walking through the border because of the
because you're a criminal
persecution of Maduro's dictatorship.
Mr. Guaido, during your time as interim president, you had oversight over Citgo and PDVSA, humanitarian assistance, and so much more. You had embassies around the world. A group called Politically Persecuted Venezuelans in Exile here in Miami say that you, quote, had an opportunity to do much and in the end did very little. How do you?
You guys see? So I explained to you guys before the tactical error that the Biden administration, the Obama administration, and the Trump and Bolton White House made by putting heavy sanctions on Maduro. They realized that Juan Guaido is in cahoots with the enemy. That only makes him more unpopular. So now they're blaming him for their failed policy. So Juan Guaido, the funniest thing Trump ever said, Juan Guaido is like the Pete Buttigieg of Venezuela. So he did fail in epic fashion, and we should never forget to mock and clown this guy because he's a criminal that tried to overthrow the government the same way they accuse Trump supporters of doing, right? But even though we laugh at him, you got to admit, this man had a tall task. The United States really set this man up. Their plan was to just announce him as interim president. They thought the global community would bow down. They thought the sanctions would destroy the Venezuelan pride and sovereignty, and they would just anoint this guy as leader. And that is not what happened. I'm going to show you guys him being attacked. There was videos of him walking in the airport. There's no fanfare. No one in Venezuela knows this guy. The people who do know him, they don't like him. And this is why this story is so glorious, because it was such a massive fail by the United States empire in a failed coup attempt. And now they're going for it again as evidence that the fact they have this guy on the show back. They have him back on the show. And you're going to see in this segment, I'm going to play that part again, where he blames Guaido.
Citgo and PDVSA, humanitarian assistance, and so much more. You had embassies around the world. A group called Politically Persecuted Venezuelans in Exile here in Miami say that you, quote, had an opportunity to do much and in the end did very little. How do you respond to that?
The opportunity for democracy remains in Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela. We must continue fighting. We have resisted a regime that has been linked to crimes against humanity, that has direct ties to Putin. Lavrov was in Venezuela just a week ago. We have resisted those that are connected to drug trafficking, terrorism. We all must be held accountable for our actions. This is a moment for the international.
You guys see, he just repeating Western smears. He said that Nicolas Maduro has ties to Russia. That's his crime. They said Nicolas Maduro met with Putin. That's his crime. How dare you engage in diplomacy that is good for your country? That is what they accuse this guy of. Well, he also said Nicolas Maduro, who had ties to the cartels, another conspiracy theory that was drummed up by the Pentagon. And let me tell you guys something. You want to know who has more ties to the cartels? The CIA, the military-industrial complex. Don't ask the United States military what they was doing in Afghanistan. I think it was like the opium farms. It was the biggest drug smugglers in the world is the CIA and the military-industrial complex. But they just float this conspiracy theory that Nicolas Maduro is tied to cartels. Not saying it's impossible, but I'm telling you guys right now, they never produce evidence. They just repeat it. This liar repeat it, and it's gonna go unchallenged because the West is pissed at Maduro because they're losing more influence in the region, and Nicolas Maduro been thrown aside, and now he has more support than ever. It was really bad during the Trump administration, especially when you had Bolsonaro sending military death squads in Venezuela, being Trump's bootlicker in the region, right? Now you have Mexico, Honduras, Guatemala, Colombia, all these giant countries, Brazil as well, all these giant countries that said enough is enough. Enough is enough. So now they're going to blame them some more. So I'm going to go back so you guys hear that part again. I'll let it play some more.
Was in Venezuela just a week ago. We have resisted those that are connected to drug trafficking, terrorism. We all must be held accountable for our actions. This is a moment for the international community to do more on behalf of democracy, to do more for those in the resistance movement, not just in Venezuela.
So they condemn Putin for invading Ukraine, but this psychopath, Juan Guaido, is calling for Western countries to invade Venezuela and to violently overthrow the Nicolas Maduro government. That is what they're advocating for. But they want to tell us about rules-based Western order? Look at these psychopaths.
Also in Cuba, Nicaragua, and yes, still have an open task and a response.
Let me hear that part again, because he said, hold up, I'll hear that part again.
The resistance movement, not just in Venezuela, but also in Cuba, Nicaragua, and yes, still have an open task and a responsibility regarding democracy.
Bro, this man is insane, son. You guys hear what he said? He said not only should we invade and violently overthrow Nicolas Maduro, we need to do it to Nicaragua and Cuba as well. Because Nicaragua's government rebuked CIA mailing in their election, and they support their Sandinista leftist government. So Juan Guaido is not only a puppet of the United States for Venezuela, he's calling for the return of Operation Condor, the United States dominance in the Southern Hemisphere, in South America. This is insanity. This is the person that AOC follows. This is the person that was invited at the State of the Union by Nancy Pelosi. This guy is a fascist thug of the highest order. And the fact that Nicolas Maduro didn't put a bullet in his head and put him in prison, it shows how much mercy they have. This is wild, man.
Did you misuse that you had options of? Did you not take advantage of all of the things, the 56 countries plus the United States, the humanitarian aid, the embassies? Did you misuse that?
Nosotros utilizamos todas las herramientas a disposición para enfrentar y poder derrotar al régimen de Maduro.
We use all the tools at our disposal to face and defeat the regime. We need much more. We have seen it in Nicaragua, in Belarus, in Ukraine. The international community has to be tougher. The tools that we have to confront dictatorships, like the sanctions, have to be exercised with strength, have to hold this dictatorship accountable and innovate and go further.
You have seen...
You guys see how crazy? Like, this guy is a danger to peace. He is saying that the West, which we cover every day, the West is unhinged, ran by war criminals, that is 100% okay with tanking Western civilization in pursuit of their warpath, right? So what Juan Guaido is saying, he mentioned Ukraine as well. He said the West is being too weak. Huh? After what Bolton and Obama did in Venezuela. After they're funding Nazis in Ukraine. There's U.S. soldiers in Ukraine. They escalate in Taiwan. There's a genocide going on against the Palestinian people. It took China to end the Yemen war that the United States funded. So the United States and the West is crazy and unhinged. But Juan Guaido, just like Hillary Clinton, was like, man, you guys are still some pussies. You guys can go harder than that. What? He criticizing the West for being too weak. And that's the premise of this segment. The title of this video is Democratic Countries Must Help Venezuela to End Maduro Dictatorship. So they're not doing enough. We need more militarism. Insanity. Let's continue the video. I still have some more receipts on too.
Close allies, friends, colleagues detained, kidnapped, tortured, and even killed. Your wife and your two little daughters, 1-year-old and 5-year-old, are still in Venezuela. Do you fear for them?
Sí, estoy muy preocupado.
Yes, I'm really worried, not just for them, but also the 300 political prisoners. But right now, I'm just thinking about Miranda and...
So by political prisoners, he's talking about the people who are trying to assassinate and kill Nicolas Maduro and try to violently overthrow the government. You mean the thing that the Democratic Party is doing to the January 6th protesters? You mean the protesters that didn't have guns? That weak fuck protest they call January 6th, compared to the assassination attempts on Maduro and the Cuban government all the time? On Fidel Castro? Venezuela is weak compared to the United States. You guys understand? what it compared, if you look at what the opposition party in Venezuela, people about what Juan Guaido has done, the United States is charging the January 6th protesters for jokes. And they did half of what the opposition party did. They're because of the death penalty from people on the left for these people. So let's continue.
Merida, my 2 babies that are under threat in Caracas. I think about their safety. I hope to keep them protected while under the threat of the Maduro regime.
Hablas de amenazas. You speak of threats. What kind of threats have they received?
Phone calls to Fabiana where they told them in Spanish that they were going to be screwed. They were going to be harmed. Also, in that call that Fabiana received on Monday, they told them about how I was going to be deported from Colombia to Venezuela.
Under this regime in Venezuela, more than 7 million people have been forced to leave the country in which they were born, and that's just in the last 8 years. Other than Syrians, Venezuelans make up the biggest group of people forced to leave their countries on earth. More than 500,000 Venezuelans have come here to the United States, many, no doubt, on their way through the Darien jungles and more. What's your message to the President of the United States, to the members of Congress that represent the American people?
That we have to keep pressuring to get rid of the dictatorship. We have to stop the flow of migration. Definitely the only way we can accomplish that is through democracy. On Wednesday, I'll be in Washington, meeting with Senator Dick Durbin and also with members of Congress. We need to continue pressuring the dictatorship.
Would you like to meet with President Biden?
We are going to be with the executive.
Have you asked to meet with President Biden?
We have asked to meet with the executive and with the State Department. And we are sure, as we feel today, that the government of the United States has dealt with democracy really well, very different from what happened.
So they're like, hey, do you got enough clout to get an interview with Biden? He's like, oh, what happened was he probably missed my message. I called him back the other day. But he was like, no, but do you have a meeting? Did Biden administration reach out to you? They texted me that one time. This guy has no legitimacy on the world stage. Even the United States government knows this guy is not doing anything in Venezuela. And I'm going to show you why here soon.
In Colombia, there is a huge contrast between the treatment of the United States and that of Colombia, evidently.
Colombia has a new president. Colombia actually is one of the countries that recognize your interim presidency. But now with this new president, is Colombia now different?
Today, Colombia is now closer to Maduro than to democracy.
Giant L, sir. Giant L. It's almost like when there's a left-leaning candidate in Latin America in current politics, and they're running on resisting the Western narrative on Venezuela, they win. Once again, Gustavo Petro is more of a social democrat, but that position is huge on the global stage. That's a giant L for Juan Guaido, just like Lula winning in the most geopolitically significant country in South America, Brazil, is another giant L. Take those L's, boy.
See you in Venezuela.
Juan Guaido, thank you very much for being with us. Appreciate it.
So I'm gonna show you guys. This is the video. This is the story from Colombia. But you see the questioning from the reporter, like, man, you had all the support. There was the displaced Venezuelan people, pretty much the class traders, just like the Cuban class traders that support Western imperialism. Like, if you ask these people, like the disinfected Venezuelan people, like many of them, they're like, what is your solution to the problem? Do you want to lift Venezuelan sanctions? If you ask Guaido and his supporters, they will say, no, we shouldn't lift sanctions. And that's why they're not popular. So you care about the Venezuelan people, but you don't want to get rid of the sanctions that's crippled your economy. You don't give a fuck about the Venezuelan people. You just Western puppets. The same with the Cuban people. You ask Cuban class traders in Florida, what do you think about the Cuban blockade? Should they lift it? I did a story a long time ago where they were like, no, we should keep the Cuban blockade. But you think you care about the Cuban people, but you're arguing for the Cuban blockade. Clown ass shit. Here's the result of Gustavo Petro winning. Venezuelan opposition leader Guaido expelled from Venezuela. Guaido said he was expelled hours after he arrived. They said he arrived irregularly. I look at this receipt here as well. And look, he went back to Miami. This is the safe haven for U.S. imperialist scum. You have Bolsonaro that's in Miami, hanging out with all the class traders, right? And look at this Kabate. Juan Guaido arrives in Miami after fleeing to Colombia and being promptly deported by the Colombian government. No red carpet or fanfare. The jig is up. So this man, like, this is the working class hero of Venezuela. Thank you for the super chat, man. Smoking L for Guaido. Giant L for my boy. Giant L for my boy. Very unfortunate. Now that's the walk of shame. The same walk of shame that Bolsonaro gave recently. So this video shows the immense popularity of Juan Guaido. This boy really thought he could show his face in public. You're like, you better take your ass home, boy. You better go back to the United States, you puppet. This is the classic L picture by Juan Guaido. So this massive failure is why they're on MSNBC. That's why, like, how can you fucking drop the ball when the West was behind you? You had the Venezuela disaffected people, that group that came out and condemned Guaido. You had the Biden administration that's ghosting Guaido. They invite him to the State of Union address, and now they can't even get a meeting with them. They just supposed to have an interview. Because this boy does nothing but take L's nowadays. There's Anthony Blinken giving him condolences for that giant L. This is this is June of 2002. For the second time in many weeks. Interim president, in strong emphasis on the quote-unquote interim president, Juan Guaido was attacked in Venezuela. The United States is deeply concerned and condemns these escalating acts of violence, harassment, and intimidation against the interim president Guaido and all those who stand for democracy. Do you guys understand how fucking clown? These liberals are the biggest clowns, man.